This episode is sponsored by our friends at BVI Yacht Sales in Tortola. With decades of experience, BVI Yacht Sales is dedicated to guiding you through every step of buying or selling your yacht in the Caribbean, ensuring top-notch service. I first met Managing Director Brian Duff way back in the day in Annapolis. Brian is himself an accomplished sailor and actually owned the rig shop where I worked for a time in the mid-2000s. Brian and his team can help list your boat for sale or help you find your dream boat, whether or not they're actually listing it. And don't let the name fool you. They've got an office in Annapolis too. We joke about broker BS on the podcast, but you can trust our friends at BVI Yacht Sales. Check out their listings and get in touch at bviyachtsales.com, just like it sounds, and tell them 59 North sent you. That's bviyachtsales.com.
Ahoy shipmates, my name is August Sandberg, and this is the Quarterdeck Sailing Podcast. Andy Schell and myself have received boat listings from our boat shopping members on the Quarterdeck, and in this episode, we are taking a look at a custom one-off 35-footer by Ted Brewer. If you want to see the video version of this, provide your own listings for us to dissect and to join the discussion, sign up with us on quarterdeck.59-north.com. Enjoy and hold fast. All right, you ready to talk about boats, Andy?
I love it. I love doing this more than anything, I think. I mean, this is back to the how can we record things we would talk about anything anyway? Well, here we are.
Here we are, indeed. Okay, so let's just get right into it then. I will find our first listing, which is this one right here, and this is a very interesting one. This is a Ted Brewer custom design, 1983 Blue Water Cruising. This is just the headline for $35,000 US. And this one, well, let's just describe it briefly, since with the one-off, there's no picture of this showing up in anybody's heads, since this is truly a unique boat. But here we go. We're looking at a kind of a I would say it's a high freeboard, a pretty like cut off flat stern with a stern hung rudder on it, full cockpit enclosure, and we've got an arc with solar panels on it, and we got a pretty high like couch roof and what looks to be a fairly conservative mast. Would you agree, Andy?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's a double spreader rig. It looks proportional, maybe I mean, the whole boat kind of just oozes this is a cruising boat feel to it. So whether you want to interpret that as conservative, probably. I mean, we had a debate before we started the recording here is what's the boat made out of? I think it's steel. But it doesn't actually say. I mean, this is a Craigslist listing. So this is like a for sale by owner, unique situation. I'll come back to that because I think there's some interesting buys you can have on these listings like this that are non-broker. That's how I bought my both of our boats here in Sweden, actually. It's hard to say, but the first thing I noticed, you have an externally hung rudder on the back there as well. So the whole thing just kind of shouts, this is a conservative cruising boat to me.
Yes, absolutely, and it's interesting, right? Because like that's all we're kind of groping a little bit blind here, because we're looking at one-offs like this, custom designs, you don't really have anything to help you along. You're very much alone in figuring out what this thing is. Like, we only have the information provided by the seller, which is the pictures and the details, the description of the boat, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But when you're looking at other boats, you can go on forums and you can find reviews, right, of the boats, and even like sailing magazines do reviews of boats, and you can ask people. Here we essentially have nothing, only what we can deduce ourselves. And
to that point, that's kind of what makes these sort of one-off boats can be very good buys, meaning you can get a lot of boat for not a lot of money. And incidentally, we were at the Stockholm Boat Show this past weekend and had lunch with our friends Linda and Ludwig. Ludwig is the designer at Rutgerson Marine. They live on the west coast of Sweden, and they went around the world in a Joshua type steel ketch, like a Moitessier replica, over 4 or 5 years. This was probably 10 years ago now. But anyway, they're looking for a new boat because they just sold their boat Mary, and they're looking for a new boat. And I asked them what they're looking for, and they specifically want an aluminum sort of high latitudes swing keel, shallow draft sort of expedition type boat. But they are specifically, and they're very knowledgeable people, so they know what they're looking for. But they are specifically looking for a one-off boat like this that might not have as big of a market as, say, an Ovni or some of these other kind of brand name production boats that have a market and a higher asking price only because people know what they are. So I think I really like this kind of. You can find a really good boat, but it is higher stakes because you just, like you said, you just don't know that much about it.
Yeah, and there's if you really know what you want, you might find. That could be some real gems to find in these custom designs, because when you have these serial produced boats by yards, they need to design a boat that will fit a very wide audience. So they need to make a boat that applies to a lot of different use cases to sell the boats. Whereas these custom designs, very often they are made for and by people who have a very, very specific use case in mind, and if that matches yours, then you could really make a great deal and find a unique boat that really kind of without as many compromises as you would have to accept otherwise.
So we have
really cool.
I've created a format for these boat shopping episodes, so we kind of have a repeatable structure that's, like I said, entertaining and educational, and that actually comes up. The last category of our format here is, who is this boat for? And this boat was literally for one specific person when it was built. So we'll come back around to that. But more on the intro style, I mean, we do know it's a Ted Brewer custom design. So, like, who is Ted Brewer? He's a pretty pedigreed designer. And he was best known for a design philosophy. He called it the Brewer Bite, or people labeled it the Brewer Bite. And it was a distinct indentation or hollow in the hull shape just forward of I think it was between the rudder and the keel.
Yeah, it's that's right. So you kind of leave, if you take a full keel and then kind of take a semicircle and bite out of the kind of aft 3/4 of the keel, and to make it a little bit of a skeg and a fin.
It basically reduced wetted surface area, so you had better light air performance was the idea. I mean, it was kind of, I guess, ahead of its time at the time, but now it's like you don't ever have anything connecting the keel and the rudder. It's kind of silly to have that, but back in the day, it was like, okay, you get kind of the benefits of a full keel with less wetted surface area was the thinking. But Ted Brewer he was a legitimate designer. He designed the Whitby 42, which is a famous cruising boat. It was a ketch, one of my dad's favorite boats. The Brewer 44, and then the Gulf Star, another production boat. So Gulf Star 50, my friends Tom and Darlene, who you know as well, his all-time boat, if he was going to buy a bigger boat, would be a Gulf Star 50. And these are all kind of classic 1980s, 90s, conservative, salty-looking cruising boats that sailed well, but didn't look fast. And that was kind of what Ted Brewer was known for. So just knowing a little bit about the designer, you know what you're kind of getting. It's going to be a seaworthy boat. Dare I say slow, maybe by our standards, but seaworthy and I guess you could say, I might say slow. Somebody else might say moderate or balanced.
Maybe.
But it's basically meant to be a long distance live aboard cruising boat, a cruising boat in the essence of it. It wasn't trying to combine cruiser racer. It wasn't trying to beat any racing rules. It was just trying to be a practical boat that you could sail around and live on.
That's right. I'm a huge fan of Ted Brewer myself. I have this book I recommend very much. Ted Brewer Explains Sailboat Design. It's an old book that I got this used. When I was a teenager, and it says It's for Del Blair, the Christmas of 1988, from Dave and Deb. So it's this.
Dave
this
and
one's
Deb, if
been
you're
around.
listening, August has your book.
I got your book. I didn't steal it, I promise. There's also a library stamp in here, so maybe they stole it. I think Dave and Deb might have stolen it. It's a little tight on the money that Christmas, but this is a fantastic book. It's really good. It explains sailboat design from the ground up, and it was kind of, this book really helped me get into all of this. And it says here on the front, learn from a noted naval architect what makes a sailboat go, what makes her good, fast, bad, slow, seaworthy, or dangerous. Then you can decide for yourself. And that is just the perfect.
I actually quite like the idea of finding a designer that you really like their philosophy and looking for their boats. I mean, Bob Perry comes up a lot on this podcast because we got to know him and he helped us with Falcon and with the new rig on Spica. But like, if I was starting from a blank slate, I'd be like, I really like Bob Perry and his philosophy. Let's see what Bob Perry boats are out there and just kind of start there. I think that's a really good. In fact, I don't think this exists, but I wish there was a way on Yacht World to just like search for boats by designer, because a lot of designers like Bob Perry bounced around to all these different production facilities. These productions would buy their designs, or they had one-offs like in this case. But I always thought that'd be a really fun way to search boat listings. Is like, all right, I want a Bob Perry boat between 38 and 44 feet. Show me what we have out there.
Yeah, that'd be really, really fun. And you would get a lot of different things because especially I know for sure Ted Brewer, he's made everything, boats from every type of material. He was involved in several like America's Cup boats as well, so he could definitely make fast racers too. And he did a lot of cruising and racing himself as well his whole life. And he sadly passed away a couple of years ago now after a very long life, but definitely one of the big names out there. And so having his name on this is definitely a positive for sure.
How big was this boat again we're looking at? I'm just looking something up here.
Oh yeah, and what was it, 35 or 34? It is a, let me see, 35.
35. Okay. So we'll come back to this when we get to the numbers, but I have a good little example here. So, all right. So should we start going into my categories here, August?
Let's do it.
Do we know where this boat was built?
We do not, and that is another one of those very important details that we're missing. Because that is, should we talk about that now? Like the client, we might as well talk about that at the top, I think, because it's so unique now with you when you have a one-off like this, and because one thing is like, who is the designer? Very, very important for sure. But I think this might be controversial, but it's who the customer is might be like even more important, because that's the who gives the design brief, right? And so oftentimes, like you mentioned, you'll have a yard, right? They will approach a designer and hire them to create a specific type of boat that they want, and they want the boat to be good at certain things, and they'll compromise on other things and trying to make a balanced design that will sell well to a certain audience. But you'll know what that is when you buy a production boat. But here we have absolutely no idea. Somebody at some point approached Ted Brewer with an idea and helped him make this boat. And Ted Brewer is not going to design a bad boat because he's an excellent designer, but he's going to make the kind of boat that his client wants him to make. And so, was his ideas good? Were they bad? We kind of don't know. And it's again, Bob Perry. He is very outspoken about how all this works. And there was an interview where I read something. Well, somebody asked Bob Perry, because he has a lot of double enders, a lot of canoe sterns that he's designed, and like what makes the canoe stern so great, or what is it about the double ender that you like so much? And he said, like, I don't like them. Just I made them because people asked me to make them. I don't like them at all, right? And
He's kind of known for that. I mean, his most famous boats, Tiana 37 and a Valiant 40, both have canoe sterns, and like he's like, no, this isn't me. It's just they became popular. Sorry.
Yeah. So you never quite know, right? And we're kind of putting a lot of trust in the original client here, who had this made.
Well, this is a good segue, because the first category I have here for us is called Broker BS. And what is the listing actually trying to sell us? This is interesting because it's not a broker, like we said at the top. This is a private listing on Craigslist, which is, I keep talking about Blocket over here in Sweden, which is basically the same thing. So, August, if you want to maybe summarize or maybe just read from the listing, there's not much here, but what would you say the kind of the seller is trying to sell us here?
I mean, it's all in the headline, right? It's Ted Brewer custom design 1983 blue water cruising, is what it says. And so I think that's it right there. And then they are showing us some. There's a lot of, there's way too few pictures overall, but there's, some of these pictures like trying to sell the experience. You have this woman at the tiller here, looking very pleased with herself and happy, and so they're definitely trying to sell that long distance adventure. I think.
There's a line in here. I mean, most of the listing is just bullet points, but there's one sentence that says, "I bought the boat in 2012." So right off the bat, we know that this person was not the design, or not the builder, not the original person that commissioned this. Bought the boat in 2012, lived on it for 7 years, cruising the full length of the Canadian West Coast in Haida Gwaii. I don't know what that is. Where is that? I guess that's somewhere in BC. I've heard of it before, but it's a place in Canada.
Yeah, I think is that like an Indian reservation or something?
Probably.
I think so.
And then she goes on to, I say she only because there's a picture of a woman in the cockpit, but the person that lists this goes on to say, "I upgraded and maintained a well-maintained vessel," and then goes on with a list of upgrades that we can come back to. But I mean, I guess this begs the question: is this person doing a very good job of selling this boat?
Well,
in the salesy sense of the word.
Well, it's very kind of straight to the point, and I'd say, look, there's just not enough information on here at all. But you're kind of getting, I think it's a very kind of honest, in a way that it doesn't look too dolled up, right? It's like hardly organized in the photos, and it's like it comes off as quite authentic, I would say.
So maybe we can tweak this. We said this is a new format for these type of shows here. Maybe this broker BS category could be on a scale, because like I'm seeing there actually probably isn't very much BS in this. This is kind of, you see what you get, what you see, and they're not trying to sell you anything or hide anything, which can be very commonplace when you see a brokerage listing where everything is just the best. So maybe on the broker BS scale, this would be a 1 out of 10.
Yeah, I would say that the blue water cruising might be like a little bit off. This is not like a blue water boat, I wouldn't say, and also like
you don't think so? I might push. I don't know. When we come back into some of the specific categories here, I think we might get to that. I might disagree with you on that.
Okay, interesting, cool.
At least in the some of the points it has for it. It might not be quite ready for blue water, but that's sometimes down to maintenance, not design.
Right. It's hard to I just think she looks so top heavy and like underpowered, but it's hard to say, right? Because we don't have the numbers on any of this.
So let's all right. So let's just say I don't think there's too much BS going on in this listing, but if anything, it's not a great sales pitch at all because there's not enough information. Is kind of my conclusion to this first category here. Not so much BS, but maybe lacking in information.
That's right. I mean, one thing you can, we're trying to teach people how to buy boats here, but there might be some knowledge to pick up about how to sell boats on the flip side, and you can never have too much information in a boat listings. If you're selling your boat, just put like hundreds of photos and booklets of information.
And then people like us can come along and pick them apart.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so let's. One thing I think maybe we didn't mention is the asking price, $35,000, and this is maybe what you were getting at when you combine the words blue water cruising for a price tag of $35,000. That seems fishy to me. Again, that could be down to the fact that it's a one-off boat. There's not a big market for it. We don't know what this person paid for the boat in the first place. You can't do like brokers can do like a sold boats listing where you can compare what did other boats like yours sell for. Well, we don't have that in this case. So $35,000 is not a lot of money for a 35-foot boat, particularly one that is claiming to be ready for blue water cruising. But if it turns out that, this actually is what they say it is, then you have a very good bargain.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay, moving on to our second category. I'm calling this the dock walk. What are the first impressions from the listing? So this is basically, August, where you and I will go through the limited photos that we have, and I think ignoring the bullet points, because we'll come back to some of the specifics that they mentioned in the listing, but I think we should go through the photos, again, being this an audio medium, trying to describe as best we can, what do we see, what stands out to us when we flip through the photos on this boat. I kind of hinted at this at the beginning where you said maybe it's conservatively rigged or under-rigged, and I said, oh, maybe it's a moderate cruising boat, whatever. So let's go through that. Let's pretend we are walking down the dock and we come across this boat with a for sale sign on it, and it piques our interest. What are the first things you notice? And I'm specifically looking at this photo of the boat parked at the dock that gives us a kind of reasonable overview. So what are some of the first things you notice?
Well, I'd say it's definitely made for this is not a day sailor. This is made for adventuring, right? You've got you got this full cockpit enclosure. You have the solar panels and the arc on there. It's definitely ready to go adventuring. There's what looks like a canoe on the foredeck up there. And
I think that's a staysail in a bag. Isn't it the blue? Is that what you're looking at, or are you looking at something else?
The very light.
Oh no,
baby blue.
Oh yeah, I do see it on the opposite side of the mast now. I thought that was something in the background.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't notice that. There you go.
Yeah. So and it's quite big, quite stocky. I would say that this is a great kind of coastal adventure boat. That's also we got some. There is this. You're right. There is a staysail up there. There is a cutter stay with, I think, probably a hank-on staysail on the foredeck. And we got a spinnaker pole, and, so she definitely...
Yeah, I noticed.
She's not a motorboat. So,
I was going to say that. I noticed. So you notice a double spreader rig. You've got a spinnaker pole, which looks to be mounted on the mast, which is a really nice way to stow it and also make it easier to use. You've got that staysail, which is clearly on a hanked-on stay, and it looks to be permanently rigged because it's got a sail cover on it. I see this externally mounted rudder on the stern. So that's kind of a maintenance thing in a good way. There's no rudder post. A lot of these old boats, you have to fear for corrosion of the rudder post. We don't have to worry about that here because you've got, what are they called? Like pintles and gudgeons? Is that how those rudders attach? I think that's the word.
Oh, wow. That's esoteric. Nice.
And then I'm also noticing, I particularly like the look of these square port lights. I don't love how far forward the coach roof extends because just aesthetically, but I do like they're pretty plain square port lights. I think they're not trying to do too much with the styling. I kind of like that. I think, to me, the boat, I don't disagree with you that it has a bit of a stocky look to it, but it is aesthetically pleasing. My dad and I always joke that even kind of, the boats looks proportional. It looks pleasing to. There's nothing that obviously stands out. It's a handsome looking boat. I wouldn't call it necessarily a pretty boat, but it's got a nice sheer line. I mean, right off the bat, it stands out to me because it's dark blue, and all boats that are dark colors always look better than their white colored cousins. I think.
True.
So you might be fooled a little bit by that as well. And there's a design trick in here as well where the hull is blue, but it's got a fairly thick stripe at the bulwarks. I believe that's called the is it the cove? I always mix up the cove stripe and the boot stripe. One of them is at the top, one of them is at the bottom of the freeboard. I forget which is which. Someone will correct me, but you've got a stripe on the waterline that differentiates the hull, the top side's paint from the bottom paint, and then you've got another stripe where the bulwarks are. And what those white stripes on either side of the blue do is it makes the boat appear to have a lesser freeboard than it actually does. If the whole boat was painted white, it would look like a much higher freeboard from the waterline to the deck level than having the blue in the middle and the thick white stripe on either side of that. It breaks up the lines of the boat. So that's kind of a design trick that they do. I also noticed...
she still looks like she has a massive freeboard, even with that.
Yes. I mean, that's the problem with this boat's only 35 feet long. It's unless, our boat, Spica, an OE36, is similar length to this and way, way smaller because the designer did prioritize aesthetics over practicality. So the volume of my boat is probably half the volume of this boat but my boat looks a lot nicer sitting at the dock. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah. And also, she'll sail a lot better to windward, right?
Sure.
There's definitely some practical aspects to that as well.
I noticed like you said, the arch at the back with the solar panels, they also have a little stubby radar pole above that with a radar attached to it. It's hard to tell, but it looks like maybe there's something going on with the backstay there. Maybe there's a SSB terminals or something on there. There's definitely something coming off the backstay part way up that's hard to tell in the photos. Then you've got, the right off the bat, you can tell that it's a sail cover with lazy jacks. So it's going to be a traditional slab reefing mainsail, which I like. It's got a Dodger and a Bimini. I think, August, you want to give your rant on Biminis?
Yeah, I hate Biminis, but then I'm also 2 meters tall, so that's kind of, it's just we're natural enemies. It's it's just like the one place in a boat where you can kind of stretch and see the stars and kind of really flail your arms around a little bit, and you kind of get this. Yeah, you want to put a roof over the sky. I'm not very happy about that. But then, that's also being used to sailing mostly up in the higher latitudes where you don't really need it so much. But
so one thing, I'm going to flip to the next photo. It's number 4. It's basically showing the boat bow on, and you can see very nice. Actually, that canoe you talked about looks to be in the water. It looks more like a sort of a long, low sailing dinghy, and actually... The dinghy itself looks like a beautiful piece of artwork. It looks like it's wood epoxy. It's got a little centerboard slot there in the middle. It looks like it has maybe a sailing rig somewhere with it.
Very nice.
That dinghy. So the dinghy right off the bat, that dinghy looks to be in very nice shape. The boat looks to be in pretty good shape. You don't see any obvious signs just from the photo. But one thing that also tells me that it's at least a reasonably knowledgeable owner is they've got a Vulcan anchor on one of the 2 bow rollers. There's a Bruce anchor on the other one. So just seeing that modern Vulcan anchor means at least they've done their research on ground tackle. Then it's got a roller furler on the bow there. That's a pro furl. I happen to very much dislike pro furl furlers, but we'll come back to that when we talk about some of the specifics. I notice pleasantly there's not a lot of wood in these exterior photos. The handrails on top of the coach roof are stainless. And that leads me to believe also that I believe this boat is steel. And I believe that because of the way the bulwarks look, and we'll get to some of the interior photos when we get to that. But it doesn't say it in the listing, but usually custom boats are steel because they don't need a mold to be built from, so it's cheaper to build. And also, if it was a custom design but a home-built boat, most home-built boats are steel. Although it has round sides, most home-built metal boats are sort of hard chined. So that if this is steel, being that it's round, tells me it probably was built at a professional yard.
Really goes to, that's really interesting that we had a little session here before we went live, like trying to figure out like what actually is this boat made out of. We don't even know that. And yeah, like we don't even know if it was professionally made or if this guy made it in his backyard or gal, which is interesting. I also see we got a life raft up on the couch roof there, okay. It looks like.
Also a gas can.
Also a gas can. I mean, this is, and we've got a barbecue on the back. There's a third anchor up in the bow. Is he kind of stacked up against the push bit there?
Oh wow, yeah, okay.
So I mean,
Yes,
they're
interesting.
truly ready for anything. This one. So that is cool. Should
So
we move on to the?
well, just to wrap this category up, this dockwalk category, do you like this boat?
I like it. I think it's got like the pure kind of adventure machine vibe coming off it, which I think is really cool. And I agree. I think it's a good looking. Yeah, it's not a pretty boat, but it's a very solid kind of. It looks rugged. It looks. I like it. The sheer lines. There's a little bit of overhang both in the bow and the stern, and it's it's great. Probably I would be very happy kind of going day sailing along the Canadian coast with this, as these people have been doing. I think that's a perfect boat for that. Whether I would like to be kind of in a storm out in the ocean in this, I'm not so sure about, but no, I'm very pleased so far.
I like the boat too. I think it reminds me of a Jeep. It's like maybe a Jeep that you see that's got like a lift on it with bigger tires and maybe like a roof rack with a bunch of gear strapped to it. It feels like an overland Jeep or like almost like Lee's our high top VW camper van. Kind of ugly, but pretty cool to look at, eye catching with all the stuff you need for adventures. I that's kind of the general vibe I get from this. One more quick
Yeah.
thing I noticed about the thing that it's got winches on the mast, which tells me that none of the lines lead back to the cockpit, which I think that to me is a plus on a smaller boat like this. But we can come back to that. Okay, moving on to the next category. This one's going to be tougher to do. This category is called numbers, and this is basically what do the specs tell us and what do they not tell us. Now, typically I will go to sailboatdata.com and look up all these numbers, but being that this is a custom one-off, there's not going to be a sailboat data listing. But we can start with the actual listing itself. August, if you want to go to the Craigslist listing and just run through what specs we have here, not with equipment, with the boat itself.
That's right. So we have some information here. She's 35 foot long. She's got an 11.5 foot beam, 5.5 foot depth, cutter rig, keel with skeg protection for rudder. So we don't actually have a photo of our members on the quarter had to do some digging to find a photo of what she looks like underneath the water, which is interesting. But yeah, so we know there's a skeg. We'll take a look at that afterwards. Tiller steering, full cockpit cover with side curtains, large jib winches, rolling furling headsail, 3 headsails, and self-tending staysail.
So
Self-tending staysail. What would you It's not a self-tacking.
self-tacking, that's just another way to say that. Yeah.
But did I see a? Don't you need like
A
a
boom.
track for that?
Let's see here. You
I don't
don't.
see a track.
There is. It's hard to tell in the photos. You could manage it with a little bridle, and it feels like I do think
Oh,
maybe I
hang
see a
on,
little bridle between
maybe
the
there is.
handrails.
Maybe there is a little jib boom in here.
Yeah,
Look at
no,
that.
there definitely is. There's a boom
Yeah.
inside this, wrapped up inside the flake
Very
snail.
cool.
Yeah, there you
Okay,
go.
that's nice. But
But hang on, you're getting ahead of me here. This
Oh,
is
yeah, sorry.
this section is just supposed to be about numbers, and the point being that we only have 3 numbers. We have a 35 feet LOA, 11.5 foot beam, 5.5 foot depth. We don't even have a displacement. We don't know how much this boat weighs. So this is going to be a very difficult one to pick apart the numbers. So what I've done, I found on Sailboat Data. This is a very different boat, but Ted Brewer designed a boat called a Jason 35, which is 35 feet long, also cutter rigged. So kind of in the same vein, but it looks a lot prettier. This looks actually kind of like it has a canoe stern. Looks like almost like could mistake it for a Tiana 37. You couldn't if you know what you're looking at, but it's that sort of vibe. External chain plates. But anyway, just to get a comparison, this also, if you look this up yourself on Sailboat Data, has the classic Brewer bite we were talking about at the top of this episode.
do you want to share your screen or send
Oh
it
yeah,
to me?
sure. No, yeah, here we go. Yeah, I can try a screen share here. Let's see this screen. I want the Jason 35. Here we go. All right, can you see this here, August?
I can, yes.
All right, so here's the Jason 35. Actually, really cool looking boat. If I was looking for a Ted Brewer boat, this would be the top of my list. But anyway, you can see the Brewer bite right here in the drawing. That's that little cutout between the back of the keel and where the rudder is. But I pulled this up just to look at the numbers. So this is an LOA of 34 and a half feet, so similar to our one-off steel boat we're looking at. Waterline length of 27. That's quite a lot of waterline for a boat. I mean, it doesn't have that much overhangs. We've got a sail area of 634 square feet, 11.1 foot beam, so this is slightly narrower. Displacement of 16,000 pounds. That is awfully heavy. In comparison, my boat, the OE36, is 36 feet LOA and is a displacement of only like 11,000 pounds. And even my boat's a heavy boat. Of that, 6,200 pounds of ballast, max draft 5 feet. So that's sort of in the ballpark.
Quite similar. Yeah.
And we've got our numbers down here. These are the numbers that I really like to look at. Our calculations. So sail area to displacement. That's the ratio of how much sail versus how much the boat weighs. That's 15.5. So that's kind of, we've talked about this a lot before, but that's in the ballpark of like, this will be a good sailing boat, but not high performance. I say anything over 15 is okay. Anything under 15 is really a deal breaker in my mind.
Right.
Ballast to displacement, so that's the ratio of how much ballast versus displacement. So that's kind of gives you an indication of how stiff the boat's going to be, 36. That's also not entirely true because stiffness is also dependent on hull shape, how beamy is the boat. A more beamy boat requires less ballast to get the same amount of stiffness. Displacement to length, this is like how heavy is the boat. So this is basically a ratio of the displacement weight versus the waterline length. So the higher the number, the heavier the boat, and this is 367. That is quite up there. Comfort ratio, that's a little more subjective, and I don't recall the scale for that. It's 35 on this boat. I don't remember what those numbers mean.
I know that it was actually Ted Brewer who came up with the comfort ratio.
There you go.
And it is a formula. So it's not. It is objective in that sense, and I don't. It's quite complicated, but it is. It's meant to try and put some tangible numbers to how it would behave in a seaway, and it's a formula where it's like displacement divided by waterline length times beam squared, stuff like that, and it gives you an idea of how well it will behave in a seaway.
Same thing, this capsize screening formula is also a number based on how likely is the boat to capsize. Then you have theoretical hull speed, 7 knots. And then this one's an interesting one, pounds per square inch of immersion. This is basically carrying capacity. Like, how much weight do you need to put on this boat before the waterline will sink by an inch? So the higher that number, the more carrying capacity you have. And Lyle Hess, who designed the Bristol Channel Cutter, was famous for designing boats that basically you could load up with a ton of gear and not really affect the performance. So the higher that number, the more carrying capacity it has in a cruising sense, and the more stuff you can put on it without significantly slowing the boat down. The far extreme of that is that Far 40 we were looking at as a race boat to buy maybe in Sweden. That, was extremely lightweight, and it's going to be very affected by the amount of weight you put on it because it's going to start to sink on its waterline and really slow down. So I thought that's an interesting one. So this could be a very different rig and sail plan. I mean, it is a cutter. This Jason 35 is a classic cutter rig. The mast is almost in the middle of the boat. It's also got a boom on the staysail. So if we assume that this boat is similarly proportioned to our custom Brewer that we're looking at on the listing, then I would say that these numbers kind of back up our initial impressions that this is a conservative, classic cruising boat. These numbers are going to look very similar across boats designed for this purpose of this era. So I think we hit the nail on the head at the top of this episode there.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see here. Moving along, our next category is the design DNA. I actually think we kind of touched on that quite a bit. So maybe we can modify this format on the fly here as we go. But I believe you kind of summarize that. This boat is designed to be a cruising boat, an out-and-out cruising boat.
Yes.
Here's a fun category. Living aboard, life aboard. This is where we can dive into some of the interior photos and some of the more close-up stuff. The point of this is what it would actually be like to live on this boat. Now, the seller says they lived on it for 7 years. So clearly it must have worked. Either they had something, funky going on in life and needed to live on the boat, didn't have a choice, or it worked well enough that it was comfortable enough to live on for 7 years. And I think that's kind of my first impression is that second category. So let me stop my screen share here, Augustin, if you want to take over.
Actually, already stole it.
You already stole it. Good.
There we go.
So what do we think this boat's gonna be like to live on? We can talk about the interior arrangement, the berth arrangement, the practicalities of the galley, the head, et cetera, et cetera. Let's where do you want to start?
Well, there are some unique things here that I find very interesting. First, if you kind of just look at the layout of what it looks like inside, you're coming down the companionway here, and the first thing that greets you is this enormous coffee thermos thing mounted on the bulkhead. You see that?
I see it, yeah.
Just as you're standing in the companionway, you have this enormous 20-liter coffee dispenser on the wall right by the galley, which is quite interesting. And you don't have a so you're coming down, and there's the galley is to port right as you come down the steps, and there is a nav station on your right as you come down to starboard, but it is a standing nav station, so it's just kind of alongside, kind of fore and aft oriented, and you're just like standing in the middle of the hallway to do your navigation, and all your instruments and everything are kind of facing into the center line of the boat. And then as you continue
hang on, one comment on that nav station. It is a standing nav station. It's hard to see this in the photo you're looking at, but there you go. That's a better photo. It's a standing nav desk, but it's huge for a boat of this size. They clearly prioritized paper charts, because this was been in the 80s, paper charts. But it's also built such that the sink, if you're facing the nav station, which means you're facing the starboard side and you're doing your work there, your ass can be leaning up against the bulkhead that forms the sink in the galley, which is similar to how we designed Falcon, having a walkway through the galley where you can support yourself on either side of it. That was the intention here, where you're standing, but you can brace yourself against the sink while you're doing your work at the nav station. This is one of the sort of design things I noticed when I browsed these photos earlier that kind of leads me to believe that this boat actually would be quite practical offshore, because a lot of these little small details like that. I really like that, actually. I think it's unique, and it seems to me quite practical, other than you're not going to be spending hours writing your dissertation there if you're not going to be sitting down. But I do think it's practical.
I agree. I really like this, actually. And it's, as you said, you're giving up the seat, but you're getting just an enormous space for this. So you can actually have like your full paper chart out of your whole area. And, you can't be sitting there for hours, but that's kind of maybe like a good thing. We've all been there sitting at the nav station for just like hours and looking through the same forecasts for the 20th time and like considering different routing options. This is kind of this will help you just to make a decision a little faster, because you have to stand up to do it, which
that's a fair point.
I
really like on that. I think your mouse just hovered over there for a second. On the side of the coach roof, there's these black squares that look like maybe they just were glued up there with like those kind of whiteboard chalk markers. And the owner, whoever was living on this, looks like that was kind of their logbook. Water filled 11/1/25, holding tank flush 10/30/25, fuel 281 gallons, propane 10/30/25. Like, somebody was keeping track of stuff, which most people don't do, especially if you're living aboard. So that's pretty cool. I actually really like that, and it tells me that this owner did care about taking care of the boat. And I got to say, the interior, with the kind of white headliner and white bulkheads with the teak varnish trim, is real classy, classic. I really like that. I think the look is really nice. I just like that style. I also noticed that it doesn't appear to have a headliner, which is like the best thing ever. That you see some backing plates from some hardware on deck. If you've ever taken down a headliner to work on stuff behind it, getting it back up again is a freaking nightmare. So no headliner, if done properly, is a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I really like this. And this large surface for the nav station could be used for, like, you know, you can stand up here and do like rope work and stuff. There's some what looks to be like some great storage right underneath here with boxes of different things. You can have this little workstation as well. And yeah, I think this is pretty cool, and it's very well because you have your chart plotter, your radio, and things up by like close to the companionway, so you're very easily accessible both from outside, sitting at the companionway, which is, if you're short-handed and you're in high latitudes and bad weather, you're going to be sitting a lot in the companionway just on autopilot and keeping track of things. I think the instruments here are very well placed for use both from the outside and also very accessible from the nav station.
There's a good. We're getting lost. You know, I would spend all our time at the nav station, but the point of this boat is what's the livability of the rest of the boat. If you flip to image 13, August, there's another good, gives you some scale here of maybe that same woman that was at the helm in the galley. And I really like this galley for the same reason I said about the nav station. Is once you can tuck yourself in between so first of all, the sink is right in the center line, and that means it's going to drain on both tacks. So to me, this does tell me that this boat was designed for blue water sailing in mind, because they thought about, okay, if we're sailing on either tack, how's the sink going to drain? We did the same thing on Falcon. Falcon's sinks are in the center line, so they drain on both tacks. But you can tuck yourself in there. This is almost a U-shaped galley where if you're standing facing the stove, you'd be facing outboard on the port side. Your butt is against the sink and bracing yourself there. And then you have this sort of entrance by the companionway to the galley. So I do think this is a proper seagoing galley, and it's got quite a lot of counter space aft, kind of under the cockpit seat. There's probably, we didn't really look at this on the outside, but there must be a bridge deck seat in the cockpit where you kind of have to go up and over to get down to the companionway, similar to Eastbjorn, but maybe not as exaggerated, because that gives you then sort of space underneath for countertop space. So for a 35-foot boat of this era, I feel like it's a pretty nice looking galley. So from a livability standpoint, I actually think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Great for I think just moving around and doing stuff down below while short-handed or even single-handed would be great on this boat, because from the galley you can see your chart plotter screen very well. There are ports leading just straight back out into the cockpit, so you'll probably be able to like see what the tiller is doing, what the autopilot's doing, how the people in the cockpit are doing. You can see out on both sides through these ports, and while you're cooking, and like just full overview of everything that's going on. It's really nice.
Yeah, so let's see here. I'm flipping through some of these. I mean, people don't know how to take photos of boats. If we go to image 5, this appears to be the forward berth. Has to be, because there's no aft bunks. We know that from the cabins there. But again, a clever little dressing seat in there. Instead of having the typical V berth where you have a triangle cutout in the middle, they have what appears to be a double bunk on the port side with this little cutout for a seat to get dressed. And if you've ever gotten dressed at sea, you know that you need a seat to sit down in. Otherwise, you're going to fall on your face. So this, again, is another little clever design detail. But I really like, I mean, this classic white bulkheads, varnish trim with that sort of seafoam green color on the cushions. That's what Arcturus was, our first boat. And I love that. I love that color combination.
Yeah,
you can
really
see,
nice.
if you look closely, this is another thing that tells me this is probably a steel boat. You have those kind of slats just above that little seat that are screwed into stringers that provide some separation from the hull side, and the kind of trims the interior of that. But again, there's you don't even get to see the entire bunk in this picture. So the picture's clearly showing us the seat, but I'd like a wide angle shot of the entire forward cabin there.
I don't think my ass would fit in that seat.
If you go to image 7, this is the same forward bunk facing aft. And another hint that this is a steel boat. If you look on the bookshelf outboard, there's some knees there that look rather thin to be fiberglass. It looks like a welded knee that's supporting probably a chain plate there. That's maybe the forward chain plate for the forward shroud, or just stiffening the deck, unclear.
Could be. Still no inner liner. There's some bolt nuts in the ceiling up here.
We have a good, if you go to image 11, there's a pretty good photo of the port side of the salon. And it's got a nice centerline folding table where the leaves fold up both sides. And it appears that you've got a pretty nice, very similar sort of salon shape to your boat, to Eastbjorn, August, with some nice storage behind. Again, clearly this was a boat that was lived on because there's some neat little paintings on those cupboard doors and the cushions. It actually looks pretty clean and nice on the inside. And I mean, from a livability perspective, this is definitely a one or two person boat. It's quite small down below, but very cozy. I love the vibe. I really like this old school vibe. We didn't talk about. There's a heater in one of these pictures that's designed in a little tiled nook next to the starboard. This looks to be facing forward next to the starboard settee. So that's a nice little built-in touch. Clearly built for the Pacific Northwest.
Very, very nice. Yeah, and I agree. Definitely made for a short-handed crew. If we're like with how that nav station is set up, right? Somebody standing there to do their navigation work's going to be very annoying if you have a big crew that's coming up and going down and kind of moving back and forth in that hallway. So, yeah.
So my next two categories here, which tie into the livability, is this boat was built in 1983, we're told. So it's, what is that, 43 years at this point. So it's a long time. So two categories, you can combine them into one. First, what aged the best to you and what aged the worst from when this boat was built? What design or things have you noticed that age? What do you think aged the best? What aged the worst?
That's good. That's very good. What aged the best? I guess with this being a like one-off cruising design, you don't have those race rule design features that are meant to kind of work around handicap rules that, some of those just age terribly. This boat was clearly designed from the ground up just to be a self-sufficient, just made to do whatever the owner wanted it to do the best, no matter what the rest of the world thought about that. And so I think, and it still does, definitely. I think this is still a great design for this kind of exploration, adventure sailing. So yeah, I think the shape of the boat's still great.
I'll go with that interior color combination. That to me is timeless. Literally does not age. That white bulkheads with the varnish trim and that seafoam green cushions, man, you can't go wrong with that. That's my vote for what aged the best. What aged the worst, August?
Ooh, tough one. What aged the worst?
I have a good answer for this. I'll prime the pump here.
Okay.
Literally what aged the worst might be, if it's a steel boat, the actual steel. But we don't know. We don't know. But that would be my worry of what aged the worst. I mean, if you look at image number 2 of the woman standing in the cockpit at the helm, it does appear that there's some sort of discoloration on the cockpit locker lids under the cushions, and that to me looks like rust. And that's another sign that this might be a steel boat. And that's just one of those big, like, okay, that, the entire question of is this boat a good buy or not depends on, did that steel age well or not?
Yeah, very, very true. I think I'll go with the tiller steering and the stern hung rudder. I think.
I like that.
Yeah, it's cool, but I mean the boat is so big and it's so heavy. And like we don't know any of this, but I can just imagine that it's going to be a lot of weather helm if you end up in a blow with this, and having to steer with that is going to be very, very uncomfortable and rough on your upper body. So
that's fair.
Looks great, but I think practically, which is kind of what this whole boat is about, I think I would prefer a proper balanced rudder with a pedestal and a steering wheel.
What do you think is the next category? What is the best feature of the boat? Maybe that is in the aged well category, but we'll keep it for now. What is the best feature of the boat, August?
I think it's this enormous coffee dispenser at the companionway. Definitely, I might steal that. Should we put one of those on Eastbeyond? Wouldn't that be great?
That's pretty cool. I like that as well. I'm gonna say the best feature. This is a tough one. I'm gonna say that mast-mounted spinnaker pole. That's not easy to retrofit. That's a big job, and that's a really, really nice thing to have particularly when you're shorthanded. But at the very least, it just gets the pole off the deck. With that long coach roof on this boat, you're not going to have a lot of room to mount it on deck. It's going to be in the way underfoot, and I think that's the best. That's the best feature in my mind, is that mast-mounted spinnaker pole.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, biggest red flag. I think I know what you're going to say here. What is the biggest red flag that stands out to you?
Ooh, well, to me, I guess just a lack of information.
Yeah,
right?
I figured I guessed you would have said that.
Yeah, it's just that we have no idea. Actually, we should bring up a picture of the keel here. I'll go on to the quarterdeck here, and Rachel Bradley is the one who posted this listing for us. So thank you very much for that. And she also managed to dig up this photo. It's a very blurry photo of what she looks like. She's in slings here, and we have I think fairly long fin keel there with a skeg, and then of course the stern hung rudder. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it does not actually. This is incidentally does not have that Brewer bite like that Jason 35 we showed on Sailboat Data. This is more of a conservative fin keel with a skeg mounted rudder. This is an interesting combo though, with those kind of the externally mounted rudder, but also with a skeg. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. That's interesting. I'm not sure that I like that either, because the beauty of an externally mounted rudder is that it's specifically not. You don't have to mess with anything under the waterline, but this is attached. So I don't know. But anyway, okay, so my biggest red flag is if the boat is steel, that's the red flag. We just don't know what the state of that steel is. And unfortunately, with old boats like this, a lot of times you don't know until you start taking stuff apart, and then you get into some major situations there. Okay, next category. So just as an aside here, August, this format is quite fun. I'm enjoying this a lot.
Yeah, it's great.
It's taking a lot. I mean, you warned me that at the beginning it might be long. And this next category, we could really, this could be a whole other hour here, but let's try to keep this short and sweet here. My next category is called Project Creep. If you bought this boat, where does the spending spiral begin?
Yeah, I imagine there might be a lot of rust picking and painting in your future if you buy this. That is a risk for sure.
I am reminded of. I need you to fill some audio here for a second, because I got to pull up an email from a guy that talks about Project Creep, and it's quite funny. So give me fill some time here for a second.
For sure, yeah. One thing when it comes to projects and refits and stuff like this, these one-off designs leaves you again very alone. One thing is that you don't have access to the information that other owners, what they have done to their boats, and because many designs have like well-known weaknesses and problems that has surfaced through hundreds of boats and hundreds of owners going through and modifying them, so you don't have any of that. And also with boats that are made in the hundreds, these like problems and weaknesses, they arise in the earlier models, and then they can adjust and fix those in the later hulls that they make. And so if there was something else not quite right in this one, you will not only have to kind of discover that for yourself, you'll also have to discover how to fix it and how to manage it yourself, which is can be very problematic.
So on the subject of Project Creep, let's assume this Brewer Custom is a steel boat. And I'm reminded of a friend of mine I met in Sweden on the West Coast, that bought a Challenge 67. That was Che Blythe's sail, kind of competitor to Clipper, but going the wrong way around the world. They built these 67-foot steel boats meant to sail upwind around the world, and they are awesome boats. Talk about a Jeep for the ocean, but they were built out of steel. And he bought this boat, and the way they were built was such that, like I said, they had to like basically unbuild the whole thing just to decide if the boat was seaworthy or not. And Martin and I had been emailing recently because a woman we met in San Francisco, shout out to Melissa if she's listening to this, asked me about a Challenge 67, and I mentioned Martin, and I got them in touch. So Martin sent a nice email back saying, because there's one for sale on the West Coast currently at Challenge 67. So, and Martin goes on to say, he says, I had built a 43-foot steel yacht with my dad almost from scratch. And when I bought Rimfara, which is the name of his Challenge 67, in 2012, so I thought I knew I was getting into. But when the refit work really started in 2017, I had not really understood the scale of it. I remember talking with Andy and his dad, Dennis, about it at my place. This is actually, we were there because he'd sold us a spinnaker pole that he had somehow came across from a Swan 59 that we bought for Ice Bear. So,
Right.
so that's why I was in his driveway with my dad. We were picking it up. Said, I remember talking with Andy and his dad about it in my place, and Dennis said project creep, which is really how it is. Once you have done all of this and all of that, you might as well do that. And then it goes on. We went maybe a bit over what most people would have done by replacing the angle iron's floorboard structural frame with stainless. We basically rebuilt the boat from the inside out, changed some steel plating, and for that, or to just inspect, you needed to lift up all 10 tanks and then sandblasted and repainted everything. Rebuild all the paintwork on deck, new non-skid mats, new all electrics, new plumbing, ball valves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, I got a hold of a big stack of mahogany cupboard from Naiad Shipyard, so it's a bit more cozy yacht feeling, but still kept the challenge interior. And he says, would I recommend it to anyone? No way. He said, it took them 7 years. They did did it themselves. Everything was done with a small group of friends on weekends and holidays. And
Wow.
I mean, I think shout out to Martin for actually doing it. But that's the kind of thing, we basically did this on Falcon, but the difference on Falcon, it was a solid fiberglass hull and structurally it was perfectly sound. Whereas when you get a steel boat, depending on the steel is easy to fix because it's easy to weld, but like, man, if it's not structurally sound to begin with, you're now rebuilding the structure of the boat before you even get to any of the nicety things. So that's the risk with project creep on this boat in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Okay. We covered this already. Next category, what's missing? Frankly, like everything in the list, meaning in the listing, what's missing in the listing? I think we covered most of that. Okay, August, here's a good scale question. This is next category. Where on the scale of fantasy versus reality would you see this boat, the way it's being portrayed? Do you think if you bought this boat, you'd be basically, it would be realistic based on what the listing is, or do you think the listing is a fantasy of what the reality of this boat would actually be?
No, I think it's quite, clinical. I think it's presented. It feels like a very authentic listing. This would not be my pick for a blue water ocean crossing passage maker, as I feel it's implied in the heading. But it's great boat.
So I actually do think, just looking at the listing, is this fantasy or reality? I kind of agree with you. I think it's probably on the reality scale that you probably are getting what the listing is saying you're getting, particularly at that price. I mean, $35,000 is not a lot, and this is a lot of boat for that money, especially when you look at the stuff it comes with, and it's fairly well. It's so hard to say recent. It says new standing rigging 2017. Well, that's not new anymore. This is classic boat listing stuff. New standing rigging 2017. Full batten mainsail. Like, okay, well, that's not new anymore. That's almost 10 years old. Now, This is interesting. New Yanmar diesel in 2015. So that's not that old for a diesel, but it does have 1,200 hours on it. That's pretty low hours.
Yeah. That's pretty nice. Those are great
like
engines too.
So I'd say it's on the reality side of that scale, fantasy or reality. And my
New toilet 2015.
2015, yeah. So just to read between the lines here, new Lavac manual toilet. So what that Lavac is, that's one of those toilets that has a rubber seal in the lid, and you close the lid and you pump vacuum pressure into a chamber underneath the toilet, and then you push a foot pedal and it just sucks it all out. My dad has on Kodiak on his trawler has electric vacuum flush toilets, and when they work, they are awesome. They're like airplane toilets. They're just like a jet engine, just sucks everything out of there. However, when they clog, there is no way to remove any. You can't just pump and kind of force it. You're just screwed. And a couple times it clogged on my dad's boat this winter when I was down there. So I don't have enough experience with the manual version. My friend that had an Allberg 35 had that. I think they are pretty good and they're fairly simple, but so that's something I'd have to do a little more research into.
Right.
Okay, second to last category. Who is this boat for? Who should actually buy this boat? What is the market?
Great category. I think I think like a couple. That's a great boat for a couple to do, like, or even like a family boat. Great little family boat to take like a year off and go cruising in this. I think would be fantastic. But yeah, a couple, 2 people actively sailing the boat, I think would be great on this. So if you want to have an adventure year, or if you're retired and want to get out there, do some sailing, I think that would be wonderful. And I mean, it's definitely like kind of cozy exploration, just like sailing the day, anchor at night in some cove, and fire up that nice barbecue on the back. And it's a great kind of exploring coasts boat. I think, if you want to kind of do a circumnavigation and be all kind of high seas hero, I don't think this is the one that I would get. I don't think the actual sailing part of this boat would be that enjoyable. I think downwind, I think it could be a lot of fun because you have that spinnaker pole, you have the jib boom, which is really fun.
It comes with a very nice looking kite as well in the photos. It does. Beautiful, colorful spinnaker on there, which is cool.
Yeah, so a downwind, it's going to be fantastic. I mean, but which boat is not fun?
I was going to say,
downwind, right? But I think just like with this big arc and the bimini and all this stuff in the cockpit and the tiller, I think like any other point of sail than downwind, I think it's like not going to be that enjoyable. So I think this will. I would, if I wanted to just like slowly explore some high latitudes coastline and to stay on anchor until the wind was behind me, and then go to a new place and explore. That's what I would do with this boat.
Yeah, I agree. I think bringing this full circle, it was Rachel on the quarterdeck who posted this. The little bit I know of Rachel, I think this actually might be a very good boat for Rachel. That steel being the biggest caveat there. I just don't know what the condition of that is. But, when you're talking about coastal cruising and stuff, like, the stakes are lower, so if the steel's not perfect, well, does it matter? At that price point as well, like buy the boat. You also probably have some bargaining power in the price here because it is a one-off. There's not going to be a big market for it. But I think if it's not for Rachel specifically, I think this is definitely a boat for either end of the spectrum, either a young person or a young couple that doesn't have kids and doesn't have a ton of money but has a lot of enthusiasm and wants to learn and do things by themselves. I think it's perfect for that. Or at the other end of that spectrum, somebody that's, the kids are out of the house, they're retired, and they want a cool boat to kind of just cruise around on that's not going to cost a lot of money if they don't go overboard and fall into that project creep hole. Because I do believe this boat could be perfect without doing anything to it to just cruise around in a low stakes, kind of close to shore, like you said, coastal. I'm not sure you'd have to do anything to this boat, particularly because it's been lived on for a long time. And boats that are used a lot actually tend to be better maintained than boats that sit at the dock with nobody around. So I think this boat is perfect for somebody on a budget that's got enthusiasm and either some hands-on skill or at least the desire to learn that kind of stuff, and wants a boat that they can kind of have some real serious adventures on without it costing a ton. Now, I always say there's no such thing as a cheap boat, but you just got to be careful with, what do you actually need to change before you enjoy this boat. And I think you could at least take this boat out for a year or two and not do anything to it and enjoy it.
Probably. Yeah, I agree with that.
Last question to wrap up our first reboot of the boat shopping. August, would you buy this boat?
Yes, I would.
I also think I would buy this boat. I'm actually kind of talking myself into it as we're going through this. I like this a lot more than I did when I first looked at the listing that Rachel sent there. So yeah, so 2 for 2. We would buy this boat. There you go, Rachel. You have our stamp of approval.
Go for it. Yeah. Fantastic.
Cool. Well, August, this was great. Let's keep this going. I like this format. I think this is fun. Let's see how we do it on the next one. We have our next boat that we're going to do is kind of at the opposite end of this spectrum. It's going to be a CNC 44, which was, like you said, the reddest boat you've ever seen. So I'll leave you with that. And for those of you listening on the podcast, that'll be next week's or some future episode. And those of you that are watching live, we'll be back in. Give me 15 minutes here, August, to regroup. We'll start at 10:30 if that's good with you.
Thank you very much for listening, and thanks again to BVI Yacht Sales for sponsoring the show. Find them at bviyachtsales.com. If you want to join the Quarterdeck, go to quarterdeck.59-north.com. The Quarterdeck podcast is produced by August Sandberg for 59 North. Music is by the Storm Weather Shanty Choir.